Good morning, everybody. Tara here with a Wifey Wake Up podcast. And let's get rolling a few minutes earlier than scheduled because we have a terrific topic and I have lots to do today. So the topic is women can't swallow red pills. And it's an intriguing one. Let's get going. So first of all, to make sure that we're on the same page, I'm just going to quote what red pill is to Wikipedia. I think it's a good summary. Now, of course, this goes off into other areas of life and has different meanings in different genres, but this is generally what it means. In the film The Matrix, the main character Neo, of course, played by Keanu Reeves, is offered the choice between a red pill and a blue pill by rebel leader Morpheus. Morpheus says, you take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. Did you hear my Minnesota accent there? It is implied that the blue pill is a sedative that would cause Neo to think that all his most recent experiences were hallucination, so that he can go back to living in the Matrix's simulated reality. The red pill, on the other hand, serves as a location device to locate the subject's body in the real world and to prepare them to be unplugged from the Matrix. So it can go off in many directions, right? It can go into life. I've even read that it was the creator's intent to open our minds to transgenderism. There's, of course, dating, the dating realm and the manosphere. But I'm going to address it a little bit more generally and relating also to men and women, because of course the title is Women Can't Swallow Red Pills. Here we go. Women, if you're hearing this, hear me out. We'll get there. You'll listen up. So I think we're all raised and develop in early childhood in a blue pill state. It's just a natural state of being, right? Your early childhood is a natural dream state, and you perceive the environment you're not really in reality to begin with. So I would say, quote, the blue pill is kind of a natural state of being, and evolution, how you grow up, is actually a slow reality realizing process, and the degree to each one of us comes to reality or are, quote, red pilled varies, right? And so that's point number one. But I think for girls especially, we are encouraged to stay in that dreamlike state and to be in that kind of fairy tale like state. Think of all of our Disney movies and the fairy tale princess stories and them being their Prince Charming. It is all really entwined in how we are raised. Now, I want to start out too that I'm not vilifying, I'm not complaining about this. It's just what it is, right? And it's something is part of, quote, the red pill process that if we can just realize, then we can choose how we want to be. So last weekend, just a case in point, we took our granddaughter. Yes, we have a granddaughter. She's 8 years old, and we had an amazing time at the local Renaissance Festival, which is a huge event. It goes on for several weekends. It's a whole village in the River Valley in a place called Shakopee, Minnesota. And on the way there, Grandpa gave her $100 to spend on fun stuff, right? He says, we'll take care of the boring stuff, and here's $100 for you to spend on whatever you want on fun stuff. Yes, technically, in a way, I already am a grandma. I know, amazing. And we had a wonderful time. And within 15 minutes of being there, she had already spent her money, but wait a minute, not her money. She got a tiara. Of course, she had to complete her fairy princess outfit, and she got earrings, like cuff earrings. And she spent not her $100, but Grandpa chipped in $115. And so she gets to leave with still plus $100. Score, right? And I want to emphasize, I'm not condemning my husband here. I mean, he's a wonderful man, and I think most people with the means would do the same thing. And it's just fun to see. She's 8 years old, so she's just coming into the age where she's still in that dream stage, and also coming into reality. So she understands, spending $100. But my point is this is how easy it is to kind of to keep promoting that dreamlike state. And again, I'm not vilifying it. I do the same with our goddaughters. It's just a lot of fun, and especially to I don't know, it's just fun, right? And so, but my point is that we actually keep promoting that dreamlike state in girls, and longer, I think, than we do for boys, and in a different kind of way. So I grew up in a middle income household, and my parents budgeted. I knew what in the black and what in the red meant while I was still in elementary school. And my parents saved, they were able to build a house, and I grew up in a similar environment. I think that most girls in my age group, but also in my class, probably grew up like, watching the Disney movies. We still had the books that had the fairy tale princess stories, and the Barbies and all that stuff. But also, we also had television that was really promoting a certain way of living. My mother, for example, very much wanted a new house and a certain style of decorating. And I know my dad did too. Not the decorating part, but he wanted the new house, the detached garage. But in particular, I think it's emphasized for a girl and how she sees her mom interacting with her dad, and how she expresses her desires in life, and how they go about it together. And so I think also that became a certain expectation for me as an adult woman of what I expected to have in life. And so I think how we grow up, not just, of course, it plays a large role in how we see our parents, if we have two parents in the home, fortunately, how we see them interact, but particularly as girls, how we see our mother conveying her needs and desires, and how those are fulfilled. And so I know that I heard, like I said, they both wanted a new house, but I heard how she wanted to have a certain, that living room that never got used, right? But it was decorated a certain way. And how they handled being on a tight budget and what that meant to me. And that meant at a young age that I was earning a lot of my spending money. And that was, I think, very impactful and actually very helpful in a way. I did not have grandparents handing me $100 bill and saying, spend it how you want. Maybe if we were in a neighborhood garage sale environment, they might say, here's $5. I mean, $5 went further back then, but they might say, here's $5, spend it how you want, but very different scenario, right? So, but what I want to point out also is even before Disney, there were these fairy tale books, right? That, I mean, I can name a handful, and I'm not even getting to all of them, but there's Cinderella, there's Snow White, there's Rapunzel, there's Beauty and the Beast, right? Belle from Beauty and the Beast. And I think many of us have read the stories, unless you only had a family of boys. That's probably how you got out of not hearing them. But spoiler alert, they all get the prince, okay? They get Prince Charming, they get the knight in shining armor, they get swept away to a castle and live forever, happily ever after, right? But I think the part that I want to emphasize, what they also have in common, is that they all grew up in hardship. They grew up with the evil stepmother. They had, like Belle was raised by her father, who was loving, but was a little kooky. And, she took care of things, right? She became the adult. She was taking care of the house. They all were taking care of the house in some way. Or like Rapunzel was just locked away. And all in their own way, had to find a way of transmuting their misery into something beautiful, connecting with nature, connecting with the animals. And it was it was that nature about them that attracted the prince. It was that the prince could hear Rapunzel singing from the tower, and that it drew him to the tower. It was Cinderella's magical nature that was that kind of the magic itself, nature itself brought her literally to the prince's doorstep, right? And it was that process that actually developed the beauty of the woman. It wasn't just her sheer, although her outer beauty was a part of it. And I think that's what's missed in our society. Now, hear me out. I have many more points on this, and this is going to go into other podcasts, I believe, because there's just so much to emphasize. So I think what's happened these days, and I'm one of these women, is that we were taught to be our own heroines. And so when you become your own heroine, you see your situation as miserable, no matter how miserable it actually is, and you transmute yourself more into the male role of and then you become your own hero. So you are the rescued and the rescuer in one. So of course, why would you need the knight in shining armor if you're already rescuing yourself? Now, hear me out, women. I'm not condemning this situation. I'm just pointing out what I think are the underlying lessons and principles here that could help provide us some insights. And what is the difference is that they turn into semi-men in that situation. They become the hero type rather than the heroine. And if you notice in our movies today, the quote heroines, the women heroes, are not actually using their feminine powers to overcome the situation. They're actually turning into a masculine role and playing the hero role rather than the heroine. And that can be a whole podcast on its own. So what I'm saying is, I think if we take the fairy tale princess, and you may think this is not reality, Tara, we're not living in a fairy tale, but as we know about through Joseph Campbell's work, is that these stories actually point out the underlying truths and archetypes that have existed for centuries, really, in our human race, and is actually through these stories that we learn. And so the red pilling for women, I think can happen differently. And I think it happens at different stages, but it's different for men and women. And so what I'm going to point out here is, if we take these stories of the fairy tale princesses finding their Prince Charmings, these princesses did have a red pill situation, right? They had the evil step parent. They had lost a parent, if not both parents. They lived in poverty, even if, in Cinderella's case, they weren't impoverished, but her stepmother and stepsisters put her in an impoverished situation. And they lived in that reality, but they transmuted themselves within that reality. And I believe that red pill, quote, red pill, is meant to be a temporary state. Now, like the stages of grief, a person can move through them. And I think to be a healthy individual needs to move through them, but it's a choice. And we can stay in the red pill state that includes the misery and the suffering, which is feeling the pain, the anger that is associated with discovering the reality. So I'm going to share a little bit more where I'm coming from as well. So by no means, I did not grow up in an impoverished way, but like I expressed, I definitely had to earn my way as a kid for the extras. We weren't dirt poor by any means, nothing like that. But where I can relate is that I did have the evil stepmother experience, but it was my own mother. This was my red pilling experience in life. And it is very difficult. And I think no one really wants to see the reality until they're really faced with it. And when they're faced with it, they have a choice, right? Like in the Matrix, you have a choice. And I think if my situation was any less severe, I probably would have chosen to stay. And my situation, really briefly, was I grew up in a household with a borderline personality disorder mother, someone with extreme narcissism that actually gets pleasure out of causing pain and has literally said so. And I spent years trying to make things better, right? Trying to trying to be the solution to the situation. But you can't be the solution with a person who actively and knowingly is destroying a situation. And so that was my evil stepmother situation. And it was that the most difficult thing I've gone through in my life, but also the most enlightening thing that I've gone through in my life. And the reason I bring that up is I think it relates to the princesses story, where so many of them, right, had the evil stepmother, like really, truly cruel. But they transmuted, they changed, they transformed through that. So they did have, quote, the red pill experience of seeing, wow, life is not full of puppies and roses, right? My father died and now I'm stuck with my stepmother and she's truly evil. And my stepsisters are following that example. And so I'm surrounded by evil, but choosing to transform that, cleaning the sooty fireplace, but singing, connecting with the animals. And then that's, I'm simplifying here, but that's what develops the characteristics in her to attract the prince. And what we're skipping ahead and doing is I surmise, and this is all an open conversation, these are hypotheses that I have that I think would be interesting to converse about with someone who's knowledgeable and insightful on such things as well, is that perhaps the feminism movement, if you were to ask women, if you were actually get them to open up to have a decent conversation with a woman about red pill, that perhaps feminism was the women's red pill moment and their reaction to their perception of what they thought was the reality that was happening to them. But here's another, okay, flow with me here. So now I'm going to move on to Belle from Beauty and the Beast. And for those of you who don't know the story, roughly, she is a peasant girl whose mother dies, but she grows up with her loving father, but he's an inventor. He's kind of kooky. But she grows up taking care of the household. She's very much a bookworm. So that's her life. So she's innocent in the way she has a sort of innocence, but she's intelligent, but more of like an inner knowing kind of an intelligence. And the local handsome man, Gaston, is very attracted to her. He's like, she's going to be my wife. She's going to be my wife. And she's like, no, I'm not. And she actually ends up, long story short, falling for a man who's a beast. He's literally someone who in his own castle has pulled the shades, had this let all the castle go to destruction because he was transformed into a beast. I don't remember exactly why, but I think many of you have seen the images, and he's just horrified at himself and is vilified by the town. Of course, everybody's scared of him, but they don't see the inner him, the person that was actually very kind and gentle and warm, or could be, if he was not vilified, if he was not shamed by the people around him. And he turns that shame and vilifying on himself and just becomes even more the beast. And there's all sorts of scenarios, but long story short, of course, I think we know that beauty eventually softens him. And with time ticking, in the nick of time, she transforms him into the prince he really is. And they live happily ever after, of course. In the castle is transformed and becomes a beautiful place for them to live. And that's another story of transformation, right? It's the Belle, it's the beauty who, despite her circumstances, her mother dying, living with her father, that she becomes the true essence of beauty, right? And she knows it. I mean, she knows she's attractive. She knows that Gaston can provide for her. He's dashing. He's witty, but he's also the fool in a way. But she sees something in the beast that attracts her in a way, and she has the inner knowing, the skill and the ability. Hi, Kevin. She has this inner knowing, the skill and the ability to soften him and bring out the best in him. And so I think that is a message that can be conveyed more. There is a beauty to women. I think it is hard for us to see the realities of life. I'll go back and say, I think it's hard for anyone to, quote, swallow the red pill. But there's a certain beauty in women that when we're in kind of the blue pill state of dreaminess, of what if, or I can see in this man, this beast, I can see the dashing man that is inside. I can see the caring, loving nature that is inside. That is also, there's two sides to that coin, right? The woman who has been able to get past, have her own red pill moment, but not let it ruin her. She can transmute herself and become someone new and become better because of it. And then also still have that dreamy type state about her that can see the possibility of something greater, of something better. And there's a double-edged sword to each of those. And I'm going to point these out. The woman, it is the beauty in having her be in the blue pill state where she can see the beauty in the man, see his loving nature, despite what anyone else says. When I was first with my husband, before we got engaged, I had a friend say, well, what do you see in him? And I was like, what don't you see? And it's that beauty of being able, a woman being able to have that kind of dreamlike state and see him as he is and as he can be, and in a way also believe in him even before he might fully believe in himself. But the other side of that coin, right? The sharp edge of that blade is that she can be so caught up in her dreams. And be careful, men, because you might be building this dream for her, with her, and if it's not delivered in time, you get that sharp edge of the blade, right? But the beauty is also that, the drawback is that she can really see that dream becoming reality. And I've been there, believe me. We had this situation for quite a few years in life. And so that same thing that is a beautiful characteristic can be really a drawback. And ladies, I just implore you to consider, are you in that state where your beautiful ability to see the potential of what can be? It's how a woman sees how a room can be decorated and bring that to fruition that can go too far, just like anything in life. And then the other side of it, which is the red pill, right? Reality. These stories convey that it's not that these women they did experience reality, right? They did have the harshness of reality early in life, losing one parent or both parents, but they somehow accepted it. They processed it. They transmuted that pain, that difficulty, accepted it. And it was through that transformation, that transmutation, that they became the beauty that the princes saw. And so I think that's why as women, we have this almost need to go through a red pilling experience. I think everybody almost doesn't choose red pill, right? It happens to you. And then you have a choice of whether you're going to, quote, become bitter or become better. And it's very, very difficult, right? Because you have to take responsibility that if you choose the red pill state, right, it was like, oh, I got hurt, but it's because of them. But in the red pill state, you have to say, I'm hurt, but I played a part in it. And I think that's it's women, part of our, I was going to say superpower, but it's not, maybe not, I'll say gift. Part of our gift is being able to envision a future, to create a future different from how men do that. But it can be our downfall as well. Because if we hold too steadfastly to that vision of what we want in our future and see past, we overlook the man, assuming we have a man in our life. In the scenario I'm talking about, doing this together as a couple, if you see beyond to the future and to the dream, and you hold stronger to that than you do to your man, to your relationship, well, what's going to lose, right? Your relationship is going to lose. And so it's, I think none of us want to swallow the red pill. And especially as women, because our special gift is tied in with kind of the blue pill state, to be that visionary in that creative kind of sense, it's extra hard. But there's a point where we probably need to do it, or likely need to do it, depending on the scenarios in our life. And I think actually what's happening from what I hear out there, especially particularly in the dating realm, and also those who have divorced, is they are coming by force to their own red pill moment, and that they're being forced to choose, right? And it's kind of smacking them in the face. And it's sad. I mean, because at any moment like that, those are difficult experiences to have in life. And the only thing I can say at that point is that we do have to choose. We do have to choose to become better. The stage that we go through, the red pilling stage, can be a stage. It doesn't have to be a state in life that you stay in. I think like the stages of grief, it's meant to be moved through. And so that we can be a healthy human being. And especially if we want to have someone, a significant partner in life, someone to especially be married, that we need to move through that state. Because men in particular, if you are still in that state of just being recently red pilled, and you're angry and you're frustrated, but you're blaming society and everyone else. And believe me, I know from my own situation, fortunately, my situation of having a very difficult, extremely difficult relationship experience was not within my marriage. I experienced it by literally being disowned by my family of origin. And it was absolutely groundbreaking. I had to create a new sense of being. Fortunately, I was already married, had a wonderful family, starting with my new husband and his family, and that literally saved me. So I understand that it's not just like, oh, I'm moving on, right? There are stages, and it has to happen in its own time. But in particular, if we want to have that healthy relationship later, it is difficult for women in particular. There aren't very many women who are going to be able to soften the beast, maybe to a certain degree. My husband says, I think pretty seriously, it's the role of women to tame the lion and men to train women. And I think there's a lot of truth in that. But the skill set to be able to tame a lion is different than taming a beast. So if they're still beastly, it takes a woman who's really been through it to be able to see that potential in him. Okay. So before I get off on rambling too much, there's so much to this. And maybe a few more points. I think what is different these days is we live in relative abundance compared to decades, and certainly a couple centuries ago. So many people live are out of poverty. And so we really don't know what it's like to suffer until something big happens in life. And so even these stories of these fairy tale princesses, right? I mean, that was maybe more the common way of living. And so it's harder for men to sweep her off her feet. And because of advertising, all the wealth, relative wealth that's around us, women, of course, are making their own money. She's becoming her own hero. And so to sweep her off her feet, which she still wants, is a very tall order. So what I'm saying here is both something for men and women to consider. Women, if you feel that you're constantly being disappointed, you have to realize what your expectation levels are. And men in particular, women love it when you talk a big game, but realize that you're setting her expectations way up here also. So there's so much more to say on this. Like I said, I'm really presenting some hypotheses, some things that I've observed, and certainly things that I've experienced in my own life and own relationship, that when you go through the hardest times of your life, it gives you the opportunity to transform. And it's, in conclusion, I don't think it's really in women's nature to want to accept the red pill state, the reality. But in fairness, I don't think most of us want to see reality. But I do think it's more in a woman's nature to remain in that dreamlike creative state. Not only is it promoted, like I shared in my previous story, it's also our natural state of being. That's how we create beauty in this life, and then how we create together. So at the risk of going off on many more topics, I'm going to conclude it there and say, I think this is to be continued. I think there's so much more to say on this topic. And I really hope that this was insightful and helpful, most of all helpful. And I would love to hear your thoughts as well. Make sure to like, subscribe, share if you think this will be helpful to someone. And I really appreciate it. And I see some comments coming in. I'll address those. I'd love to address those later in the comments online. So we're, of course, on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. Love to see you there. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Take care.